The moment Mike Reynolds heard those whispered words at the corner of O'Malley's pub, something inside him knew this wasn't just another Friday night conversation. Tomorrow at noon, I'm releasing everything, all the evidence. They can't silence the truth anymore. The woman's voice trembled with determination as she spoke into her phone, unaware that in the momentary lull between songs, her words had carried to the tired single father nursing his one beer for the evening. If you're enjoying this story, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more powerful human stories that will touch your heart and make you think about the world around us. Mike hadn't planned to go out that night. At 42, with permanent creases around his eyes and salt and pepper stubble he barely remembered to shave, nights out had become rare luxuries. Since losing his wife to a car accident 3 years ago, his world had narrowed to two priorities: raising his 10-year-old daughter Zoe and keeping his small graphic design business afloat. But tonight, his mother-in-law had practically pushed him out the door. For heaven's sake, Mike, you need to remember there's a world outside that home office. Go. Zoe and I will have our girls' night with ice cream and those terrible movies she loves. So here he was, perched at the end of the bar, watching Boston life unfold around him. O'Malley's wasn't fancy, just a neighborhood joint where the beer was cold, the lighting forgiving, and nobody asked too many questions. He noticed her because she seemed as out of place as he felt. Mid-30s, blonde hair cut in a practical bob, wearing a tailored blazer that stood out among the casual Friday crowd. She sat 3 stools down, her fingers nervously tracing the condensation on her barely touched glass of white wine. When her phone rang, she answered it with such urgency that Mike couldn't help glancing her way. That's when he heard those words that would change everything. Tomorrow at noon, I'm releasing everything, all the evidence. They can't silence the truth anymore. A pause. No, I've taken precautions. The files are backed up in 3 different locations. If anything happens to me, it all goes public automatically. The jukebox switched songs, and the bar noise swelled again, drowning out the rest of her conversation. But in that brief moment when their eyes met, Mike saw something that haunted him, raw fear mixed with steely resolve. She quickly ended her call, threw a 20 on the bar, and hurried toward the exit. Without thinking, Mike called out, "Hey, are you okay?" She froze for just a second, studying his face as if memorizing it, then pushed through the door without answering. Mike considered following her, then thought better of it. Whatever drama was unfolding in that woman's life wasn't his business. He had enough complications of his own. He finished his beer, tipped the bartender, and headed home, the strange encounter already fading from his mind as he thought about tomorrow's deadline for the Peterson account. "Daddy, look. That's the lady from your phone." Mike glanced up from his coffee the next morning, following Zoe's pointing finger to the television. His daughter was referring to his phone's lock screen, a photo of her mother, but what he saw on the screen made his coffee mug freeze halfway to his lips. "Breaking news this morning," the anchor announced. Dr. Sarah Blackwood, a senior researcher at VitaCorp Pharmaceuticals, was found unconscious in her Cambridge apartment after an apparent home invasion. Sources tell us Dr. Blackwood was scheduled to meet with FDA officials today regarding alleged safety violations in VitaCorp's testing of their best-selling heart medication, Cardiofix. Dr. Blackwood is currently in critical condition at Massachusetts General Hospital. The woman's professional headshot filled the screen, the same woman from the bar. "Daddy? You spilled your coffee." Mike startled, realizing hot coffee was indeed spreading across the kitchen counter. "Sorry, sweetheart. Clumsy me." He grabbed a dishcloth, mopping up the spill while his mind raced. The woman, Dr. Blackwood, had said she was releasing evidence today. And now she was in the hospital, fighting for her life. "Is she your friend?" Zoe asked, still looking at the TV. "No, honey. I think I saw her yesterday, that's all." "Oh." Zoe quickly lost interest, returning to her Cheerios. "Can we go to the park after school today?" "We'll see," Mike answered automatically, his thoughts elsewhere. Should he call the police? What would he even say? That he overheard a woman in a bar say something vague about releasing evidence? They'd think he was making it up. But as he drove Zoe to school, the woman's frightened eyes kept appearing in his mind. What if no one else knew what she had been planning? What if whatever evidence she mentioned disappeared while she was unconscious? After dropping Zoe off, Mike found himself driving not to his home office but to the nearest police station. The desk sergeant, a heavy-set man with tired eyes, listened to Mike's story with thinly veiled skepticism. "So you're saying you happened to overhear Dr. Blackwood at a bar last night talking about releasing some kind of evidence, and now you think it's connected to her assault?" "I know how it sounds," Mike admitted. "But it was definitely her. And she seemed scared, like she knew someone might be coming for her." "Did she mention VitaCorp specifically? Or CardioFix? Or any names at all?" "No, but..." "Sir, the Cambridge PD is already investigating Dr. Blackwood's assault. If you don't have specific information..." "She said she had evidence that would come out automatically if anything happened to her," Mike insisted. "That seems pretty relevant now, doesn't it?" The sergeant sighed. "I'll make a note of your statement, Mr. Reynolds. Leave your contact information with Officer Davis at the front desk." Mike left feeling dismissed and foolish. What had he expected? He was just a single dad who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, or maybe the right place at the right time, depending on how you looked at it. That evening, after tucking Zoe in with her favorite stuffed penguin, Mike sat at his kitchen table with his laptop open, searching for information about Dr. Sarah Blackwood and VitaCorp Pharmaceuticals. The story was bigger than he'd realized. CardioFix was a heart medication that had been fast-tracked through FDA approval 2 years ago. It had quickly become one of the most prescribed drugs for arrhythmia patients, generating billions in revenue for VitaCorp. But recently, reports had emerged suggesting a higher rate of stroke in patients than the clinical trials had indicated. Dr. Sarah Blackwood had been the principal researcher on the CardioFix trials. According to several medical journals, she was considered brilliant, Harvard Medical School, Rhodes Scholar, published in all the top journals. She had recently filed a formal complaint with the FDA, the contents of which remained confidential. Mike found himself scrolling through her professional profile, then her sparse social media presence. Divorced, no children. A woman who had dedicated her life to medical research. And now she was fighting for that life in a hospital bed. The next morning, after dropping Zoe at school, Mike called his assistant and told her he needed a personal day. Then he drove to Massachusetts General Hospital. He had no plan, no idea what he would say if he actually got to see Dr. Blackwood. He just knew he couldn't focus on logo designs and website layouts while the image of her frightened eyes haunted him. The hospital lobby was crowded with reporters. Mike overheard snippets of conversation. Dr. Blackwood's condition had stabilized overnight, but she remained unconscious. Police were treating the case as attempted murder. Mike approached the information desk, suddenly aware of how suspicious he must seem. "I'm here about Dr. Sarah Blackwood." The receptionist eyed him warily. "Are you family?" "No, I'm..." What was he? A witness? A concerned citizen? "I have information that might be relevant to what happened to her." "You should speak to the police, sir." "I tried. They didn't take me seriously." The receptionist's expression softened slightly. There's a detective with Dr. Blackwood now. Fourth floor, but there's security outside her room. You'll need to convince them. Mike thanked her and headed for the elevators. As he stepped out on the fourth floor, he immediately spotted two uniformed officers standing outside a room midway down the hall. Taking a deep breath, he approached them. "Excuse me. I have information about Dr. Blackwood's case." One officer, a tall man with a military bearing, stepped forward. "And you are?" "Mike Reynolds. I was at O'Malley's pub the night before she was attacked. I overheard her say something that might be important." The officer studied him for a moment, then nodded to his partner. "Wait here." He disappeared into the room, returning moments later with a woman in a charcoal pantsuit who introduced herself as Detective Rivera. "Mr. Reynolds? I understand you have information about Dr. Blackwood?" Mike repeated his story, this time including details he'd left out at the police station, how frightened Dr. Blackwood had looked, her mention of backup files, the way she'd studied his face before leaving. Detective Rivera listened without interruption. When Mike finished, she asked, "Why didn't you come forward sooner?" "I did. Yesterday morning. The desk sergeant took my statement, but he didn't seem to think it was important." Rivera's expression darkened. "I see. And what made you come to the hospital today?" Mike hesitated. How could he explain the sense of responsibility that had been growing inside him? I couldn't stop thinking about her. About what she said. She knew she was in danger, and now she can't speak for herself." Rivera studied him for a long moment. "Wait here." She disappeared into Dr. Blackwood's room again. Through the partially open door, Mike caught a glimpse of medical equipment and a still form in the bed, surrounded by tubes and wires. When Rivera returned, her demeanor had changed. "Mr. Reynolds, we found something interesting in Dr. Blackwood's personal effects. A note with the name of O'Malley's pub and yesterday's date. It seems she went there deliberately, possibly to meet someone." "Not me," Mike said quickly. "I'd never seen her before." "I believe you. But your presence there might not have been a coincidence. Dr. Blackwood was careful, paranoid, even, according to her colleagues. She wouldn't have discussed her plans somewhere she might be overheard unless she wanted to be overheard," Mike finished, the realization dawning on him. "You think she was setting up witnesses? Insurance?" Rivera nodded. "It's a theory. We're checking security footage from the bar to see who else was there. In the meantime, I'd like you to look at some photographs, see if you recognize anyone who might have been watching Dr. Blackwood that night." Over the next few days, Mike found himself drawn deeper into the investigation. He identified two men from the bar who had been sitting near Dr. Blackwood, men who, according to Detective Rivera, had connections to VitaCorp Pharmaceuticals. The story exploded across national news. "Whistleblower attack linked two pharmaceutical giants," screamed the headlines. VitaCorp stock plummeted as details emerged about the CardioFix trials and the lengths the company had allegedly gone to hide the drug's risks. Mike tried to keep Zoe insulated from the chaos. He told her he was helping the police with something important but kept the details vague. His mother-in-law stepped in again, taking Zoe for sleepovers when Mike needed to meet with detectives or prosecutors. A week after the attack, Mike was sitting in Detective Rivera's office when his phone rang. It was the hospital. "Mr. Reynolds? This is Nurse Chen from Mass General. Dr. Blackwood is awake, and she's asking for you." Mike's heart raced as he entered Dr. Blackwood's hospital room. She looked smaller than he remembered, pale against the white sheets, a bandage wrapped around her head. But her eyes, those same alert, intelligent eyes, fixed on him immediately. Mr. Reynolds, she said, her voice raspy from disuse. The man from the bar. Mike nodded, suddenly unsure what to say. How are you feeling? A ghost of a smile touched her lips. Like someone tried to crack my skull open. Which, as I understand it, is exactly what happened. The doctors say you're going to recover fully, Mike offered. Thanks to you. She gestured weakly to the chair beside her bed. Detective Rivera told me everything. How you came forward. How you helped identify the men who were following me. Mike sat down, uncomfortable with her gratitude. I just did what anyone would do. No, she said firmly. You didn't. Most people would have minded their own business. Especially someone with as much to lose as you. Mike looked at her questioningly. Rivera mentioned you're a single father, she explained. That you have a daughter. Zoe, right? 10 years old? Mike nodded, surprised that she'd remembered such details. You risked bringing danger into her life by getting involved. That takes courage. Mike hadn't thought of it that way. He'd been so focused on doing what felt right that he hadn't fully considered the potential consequences. The realization sent a chill through him. They've arrested 3 VitaCorp executives, Dr. Blackwood continued. And the FDA has suspended Cardiofix pending a full investigation. The data I was going to present, it shows the drug increases stroke risk by 340% in patients over 50. That's more than triple what VitaCorp reported. Why did you go to that bar that night? Mike asked. Rivera thinks you were setting up witnesses, that you wanted to be overheard. Dr. Blackwood was quiet for a moment. I was scared, she finally admitted. I'd been receiving threats for weeks. My apartment had been broken into once already. I knew they were watching me. I thought, if something happened to me, at least someone might remember what I said. Might connect the dots. That's a lot to gamble on a stranger overhearing you. It was desperate, I know. But I was out of options. She reached for the water glass beside her bed, and Mike helped her take a sip. I never expected anyone to actually come forward. Especially not someone like you. Someone like me? Someone with something to lose. Someone with responsibilities. Her eyes held his. Thank you, Mike. You may have saved more than just my life. Thousands of people are taking Cardiofix. Many of them could have died if the truth hadn't come out. In the months that followed, Mike found himself drawn into a strange new world. There were depositions and interviews with federal prosecutors. His face appeared briefly on national news, though he declined most interview requests, wanting to protect Zoe from the spotlight. Dr. Blackwood, Sarah, as she asked him to call her, recovered slowly but steadily. They developed an unlikely friendship, bound by the extraordinary circumstances that had brought them together. One evening, as winter gave way to spring, Sarah joined Mike and Zoe for dinner at their home. Zoe, initially shy around the doctor lady from TV, quickly warmed up when Sarah showed her how to extract DNA from strawberries using household items. After Zoe went to bed, Mike and Sarah sat in the living room, the conversation turning to the upcoming congressional hearings. They want both of us to testify next month, Sarah said. Are you ready for that? Mike nodded. He'd been expecting this. As ready as I'll ever be. It's going to be intense. VitaCorp's lawyers will try to discredit us both. Let them try, Mike said with more confidence than he felt. The truth is on our side. Sarah was quiet for a moment. You know, that night at the bar, when I saw you had overheard me, for a split second, I thought you might be one of them. One of VitaCorp's people. What changed your mind? Your eyes, she said simply. There was concern there, not calculation. And then the next day, when I woke up in the hospital and Rivera told me about you, a single dad who designs websites and coaches soccer and still found the courage to stand up for a stranger, I knew I'd been right to trust that instinct. Mike felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the spring evening. I didn't do anything special. That's where you're wrong, Sarah said, turning to face him fully. In a world where it's easier to look away, you chose to see. In a world where it's safer to stay silent, you chose to speak. That is special, Mike. That's extraordinary. As they sat there in comfortable silence, Mike thought about the strange path that had led him here. 3 years ago, he'd been a husband, a father, a man with a small business and modest dreams. Then a drunk driver had taken his wife, leaving him adrift, focused only on creating some semblance of normalcy for Zoe. He'd been surviving, not living. Going through the motions. Until that night at the bar when a stranger's whispered words had pulled him back into the world. The congressional hearings arrived with a media storm that Mike had never imagined would center around him. Camera crews camped outside his modest suburban home, forcing him to send Zoe to stay with his mother-in-law for the week. You look like you're about to face a firing squad, Sarah remarked as they waited in a small anteroom outside the hearing chamber. She had recovered remarkably well, only a thin scar near her hairline remained visible from the attack. Mike adjusted his tie nervously. I design logos and websites. I don't testify before Congress. Sarah reached over and squeezed his hand. Just tell the truth. That's all anyone can ask of you. When Mike's turn came to testify, the chamber fell silent. He described that night at O'Malley's, the fear in Sarah's eyes, his decision to come forward. The committee members listened intently, occasionally glancing at the Vita Corp executives seated in the back row. Mr. Reynolds, the committee chairwoman said finally, many people might have heard what you heard and done nothing. Why did you choose to get involved? Mike thought about this for a moment. My daughter Zoe asks me a lot of questions about her mother, what she was like, what she believed in. Someday, she's going to ask me questions about the kind of man I am. I want to have answers I'm not ashamed of. The hearings concluded with the committee recommending criminal charges against 5 Vita Corp executives. The FDA permanently pulled CardioFix from the market. A class action lawsuit was filed on behalf of patients who had suffered strokes while taking the medication. 1 year later, Mike stood in his backyard, flipping burgers on the grill while Zoe and her friends splashed in the above-ground pool, a luxury he'd allowed himself after the settlement money from his whistleblower testimony. Need any help? Sarah appeared beside him, carrying a bowl of potato salad. I think I've got it under control, he smiled. Though fair warning, I can't guarantee these burgers will be edible. I'll take my chances. She set down the bowl and leaned against the deck railing, watching the children play. Zoe seems happy. She is. We both are. Mike glanced at her. How about you? Adjusting to life at the university? After the VitaCorp scandal, Sarah had accepted a position at Boston University's Medical Research Department. It's different. Slower pace. But I'm sleeping better. No more looking over your shoulder. Less, anyway. She smiled. Though I still check my locks twice at night. Mike nodded, understanding. Some habits born of fear didn't disappear overnight. Dad. Watch this. Zoe called before executing a cannonball that sent water splashing over the pool's edge. 10 out of 10. Mike called back, laughing. Sarah watched the exchange with a soft expression. You know, when I went to that bar that night, I was just hoping someone might remember what happened to me if I disappeared. I never expected to find. She hesitated. A friend? Mike offered. A family, Sarah corrected quietly. Mike turned to look at her fully, seeing the vulnerability in her eyes. Over the past year, Sarah had become a fixture in their lives, helping Zoe with science projects, joining them for movie nights, becoming the person Mike called first with good news or bad. You know, Mike said carefully, Zoe asked me last week if you were my girlfriend. Sarah's eyebrows rose. And what did you tell her? I told her that you were my friend. A very important friend. He set down his spatula. But I also told her that sometimes people's relationships change and grow, and that's okay too. Sarah's smile bloomed slowly. That was a very wise answer. I have my moments. Mike took a deep breath. Sarah, I don't know what the future holds, but I do know that both Zoe and I are better with you in our lives. Are you asking me something, Mike Reynolds? I'm asking if you might consider letting our relationship change and grow. Sarah stepped closer, her eyes never leaving his. I think I'd like that very much. Their moment was interrupted by a chorus of giggles from the pool. They turned to find Zoe and her friends watching them with undisguised interest. Are you guys gonna kiss? Zoe called out, causing her friends to dissolve into more giggles. Mike felt his face flush, but Sarah just laughed. Not with an audience, we're not, she called back, winking at Zoe. Later that evening, after Zoe's friends had gone home and Zoe herself had fallen asleep, exhausted from swimming, Mike and Sarah sat on the back porch swing, watching fireflies rise from the grass. You know, Sarah said softly, when I was lying in that hospital bed, not sure if I would wake up again, I had this strange thought. I wondered if anyone would really miss me, not Dr. Blackwood the researcher, but just Sarah. Mike turned to her. I would have. Even then, after just that brief encounter, I would have missed knowing you. Sarah leaned her head against his shoulder. Sometimes the worst moments in our lives lead us to the best ones. Like overhearing a secret in a bar? Mike smiled. Like finding the courage to speak up when it matters, Sarah corrected. She lifted her head to look at him. No audience now. Mike leaned in, his lips meeting hers in a kiss that felt like both an ending and a beginning, the closing of one chapter and the opening of another. In that moment, under the stars in his backyard, Mike realized that sometimes the most extraordinary stories begin with the simplest acts of courage. And sometimes, the family you build is even stronger than the one you're born into.